So you're going to be shooting an interview. You need to know where to place the camera and how to frame the subject/interviewee. That's what I'll be talking about in this video. Firstly, let's assume that you've chosen a good location to film in, somewhere quiet with a plain or relevant background that is easily accessible, something like the place I'm filming in now. Camera placement is quite important, and how far away your interviewee is from the camera and the background makes a big difference to how the image looks. I'm going to introduce you to a photographic concept that will help me illustrate this and explain it. Plus, it's good information to know anyway. It is called depth of field. Simply put, it is the distance between the nearest and furthest objects in an image that appears to be in focus. Take a look at this photo. You can see that the subject within the image is in sharp focus and that the background behind him is blurry. So the camera can only focus on things that are in the same or a similar distance from the camera as the subject. In contrast to this, take a look at the same scene but shot with a deep or large depth of field. Notice how now the subject is in focus and the background is in focus, or at least less blurry than before. So the camera's focal area is larger than before, meaning it can focus on the subject and the background as well. Technically, this is controlled by the aperture or the iris of a camera's lens. However, I'm not going to go into the technical aspects of photography right now. You can affect depth of field without touching any camera settings at all. And this is done with your camera positioning. In most cases, it is desirable to have depth in your images. So therefore, you want to create a situation where you have a shallower depth of field. To do so, you will want to place your camera as close as is practical to the subject, so close enough to get the shot type you want to use, but have the subject be as far away from the background as is reasonably possible. Let's demonstrate this. In this shot, I am standing directly in front of the wall, and it looks like a very flat image. There is no depth. Now in this image, I have moved myself and the camera a meter or half a meter away from the wall. Now the camera is at the same distance from me as it was before, but I am further away from the wall. And as you can see, the image is no longer completely flat. It has a feeling of depth. That is because you have changed the depth of field by increasing the physical distance of the objects, myself and the wall. Obviously, you can't have the person on the other side of the room. That would just be impractical. But just by moving them away from the wall by 1 or half a meter, or just as much as you can make a big difference to the depth of field. In addition to distance, you also have to think about height and angle when positioning your camera and deciding your framing. It is best practice for interviews to have the camera placed at the interviewee's eye level. This creates a sense of equality for the viewer, making them feel comfortable watching it. If I move the camera below the eye line of the person, it makes them seem really big and impending or looming. It makes the viewers feel small and inferior, like they are being talked down to, which is not a comfortable viewing experience. In contrast to this, if I move the camera above the person's eye level, it makes them seem small and childlike. It makes the viewer seem large and looming over the subject, like they would a child. This is also not an ideal viewing experience. As much as possible, keep the camera at eye level. That way the viewer will feel like they are on the same level as the interviewee. Now that we've covered positioning, let's take a look at framing. Framing is very important. The first thing you need to do is decide the shot type you want to use. Generally, a medium close-up or a head and shoulders shot are used for interviews. You can, if you choose, use another type of shot for this, but I would always recommend sticking to the norm for this type of video. Remember that when framing your subject, to always keep the rule of thirds in the back of your mind. Don't place the subject dead center in the frame. Instead, put them off center, close to one of the thirds lines, and try to place the eye level on the upper horizontal thirds line. You should also bear in mind the use of negative space. If you place a subject on the right side of the screen, you should make sure they are looking towards the other side of frame, so that the negative space is filled by their vision. You must also consider what is in the background of the subject, and how much of it is showing in frame. Make sure the objects in frame aren't distracting or draw attention away from the subject of the video. Keep it plain as much as possible. You can have the person in locations that are relevant and give context to the interview, but don't have the background really busy. Making sure you have a shallow depth of field will help with this. If the objects in the background aren't fully in focus, they won't be as distracting. The last thing to consider when framing is leaving room to add graphics in post-production. For instance, you may want to have a graph or picture appear next to the interviewee to illustrate what they're talking about. Or you may want to have some text introducing who that person is, like this. If you do know graphics will be added in, or you think they might be, it's definitely worth thinking about. It will make the whole post-production process a lot easier if you've planned for it at this stage. That's it. A brief look at camera positioning and framing for interviews and talking head style video. Now go out there and film some fantastically framed videos.